My fellow Americans, in a few moments, the celebration will begin here in New York Harbor. It's going to be quite a show. I was just looking over the preparations and thinking about a saying that we had back in Hollywood about never doing a scene with kids or animals because they'd steal the scene every time. So you can rest assured, I wouldn't even think about trying to compete with a fireworks display, especially on the 4th of July. My remarks tonight will be brief, but it's worth remembering that all the celebration of this day is rooted in history. It's recorded that shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia, celebrations took place throughout the land, and many of the former colonists, they were just starting to call themselves Americans, set off cannons and marched in fife and drum parades. What a contrast with the sober scene that has taken place a short time earlier in Independence Hall. 56 men came forward to sign the parchment. It was noted at the time that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. And that was more than rhetoric. Each of those men knew the penalty for high treason to the crown. We must all hang together, Benjamin Franklin said, or assuredly we will all hang separately. And John Hancock, it is said, wrote his signature in large script so King George could see it without his spectacles. They were brave. They stayed brave through all the bloodshed of the coming years. Their courage created a nation built on a universal claim to human dignity, on the proposition that every man, woman, and child had a right to a future of freedom. For just a moment, let us listen to the words again. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Last night, when we rededicated Miss Liberty and relit her torch, we reflected on all the millions who came here in search of the dream of freedom, inaugurated in Independence Hall. We reflected, too, on their courage in coming great distances and settling in a foreign land and then passing on to their children and their children's children. The hope symbolized in this statue here just behind us, the hope that is America. It is a hope that someday every people and every nation of the world will know the blessings of liberty. And it's the hope of millions all around the world. In the last few years, I've spoken at Westminster to the Mother of Parliaments, at Versailles, where French kings and world leaders have made war and peace. I've been to the Vatican in Rome, the Imperial Palace in Japan, and the ancient city of Beijing. I've seen the beaches of Normandy and stood again with those boys of Pointe du Hoc, who long ago scaled the heights, and with, at that time, Lisa Zanetta Hen, who was at Omaha Beach for the father she loved, the father who had once dreamed of seeing again the place where he and so many brave others had landed on D-Day. But he had died before he could make that trip, and she made it for him. And Dad, she'd said, I'll always be proud. And I've seen the successors to these brave men, the young Americans in uniform all over the world, young Americans like you here tonight, who man the mighty USS Kennedy and the Iowa and the other ships of the line. I can assure you, you out there who are listening, that these young people are like their fathers and their grandfathers, just as willing, just as brave, and we can be just as proud. But our prayer tonight is that the call for their courage will never come, and that it's important for us, too, to be brave. Not so much the bravery of the battlefield, I mean the bravery of brotherhood. All through our history, our presidents and leaders have spoken of national unity and warned us that the real obstacle to moving forward the boundaries of freedom
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. I see we already getting our Facebook Live audience up and going. We have David listening in from Ohio. That's the one that jumps out of me. Hello, David, listening in from Ohio. How are you? The telephone number, 870-275-9799. I want to thank you for listening to the show and starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. If you want to contribute to the program, call or text 870-275-9799, or again, sound off on the previously mentioned Facebook page, facebook.com/Conduit News. And also, folks, it is Johnny Cash Friday, so welcome to the program. Yes. Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering into the news and events of the day and the week. All right, so check it out. We got a lot of news to get to. At the bottom of the next hour, 7:33, we'll be talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. Will be checking in with us, letting us know what's going on, all things Washington, D.C. I want to talk a little bit later on the show about this Dana D. Kelly article, a guest article that was written back on July the 6th, and it had to do with the president's upcoming pick or nomination of the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Of course, we didn't know at the time it was Brett Kavanaugh, but Dana D. Kelly has an amazing breakdown historically of how really bipartisan when it comes to presidents, in the past. It's only recent history that not having more of a bipartisan support of Supreme Court justices, has kind of gone away. It's become, very, very political. We'll talk a little bit about, I don't know if State Representative Charlie Collins is trolling Moms Demand Action or not. But he might have been trolling, but he might not have been. Charlie Collins saying in reference to the fact that elementary school kids can't take their guns to school. He said, "Call your congressman." I'll give you the details on that. It's pretty hilarious. Well, at least the liberals' reaction, meaning the anti-gunners in this case. When I say liberals, I mean anti-gunners. I'm not referring to Charlie Collins as a liberal this time. I'm talking about the anti-gunners. Then we have, let's see, what else? Walmart may be getting ready to spy on us. Did you know about this? Yeah, we'll give you that story. Well, they may be putting microphones in the aisles and stuff. Well, it's not to listen to customers, it's to listen to somebody else. But anyway. Also, we have Cindy Gillespie being publicly criticized by Arkansas legislators. I'll tell you about that. But we're going to start. Also, this is pretty big news as well. Almost forgot about this. We have the Medical Marijuana Commission. Now, now that they've decided who can grow medical marijuana, now they get to decide who's going to get to sell it. And so now they're looking at an outside consultant to basically insulate the commission from, I guess, more lawsuits is what their goal is, saying, look, if we get an outside consultant to grade the papers, to grade the applications, we'll tell you about that, as well as a lawsuit has been filed to remove Issue 1, the Bad Tort Reform Amendment, off of the ballot. We'll give you that story as well today on this Johnny Cash Friday. Now, I'm going to start with some national news. Two stories. Number one, Donald Trump is abroad. He is representing America, as we have detailed the last couple of days, pretty well. He's standing up for America. He's standing up to to NATO and to the European Union and everything else. It's very fascinating to watch. I mean, whether you agree with him or not, which I happen to agree with Donald Trump, but you got to admit it's fascinating to watch this. Well, he sat down with The Sun, the UK, some people call it a tabloid, it's a news outlet. He sat down with The Sun, and he has now publicly criticized Theresa May, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, for essentially not listening to him when it comes to how to handle Brexit. So what we have here is President Trump going overseas, and he's being asked about Brexit. He gives his answer about Brexit, and he says, listen, Theresa May didn't listen to me. I gave her advice. We have the audio. Joe, pull up the Sun article here. You first see this from Zero Hedge. In bombshell interview, Trump slams Theresa May hours ahead of meeting. You see that one. But then go to the next one, the Sun article. If you'll scroll down there, I've already kind of got it queued up. There's just different audio clips from this exclusive interview by the Sun. President Donald Trump sitting down, and this is what he said, yesterday, I guess. Listen.
Well, if they do a deal like that, it will most likely, because we'll be dealing with the European Union instead of dealing with the UK. So it will probably kill the deal with, if they do that, their trade deal with the U.S. will probably not be made.
Mm. Stop.
Because we have enough difficulty with...
Pause for a second. So what he's talking about is the fact that Theresa May is trying to... I tweeted about this the other day. You can follow me on Twitter, by the way, at Paul Harrell 1776. Make sure you follow Conduit News as well, at Conduit News. But I tweeted about this the other day because it's obvious that Theresa May is trying to claim that she's exiting Brexit, but essentially adopt a new program that is still the same association with the European Union that they had before Brexit. But Theresa May is calling it a different name. Theresa May is renaming the program. You know what I'm saying? She's been paying attention to Arkansas and how our politicians work. When people find out that a program is bad and unpopular, we rename the program and then we sell it back to the people as something completely different. When it's in reality, it's exactly the same. Everybody who's making money off the deal is still making money off the deal, is still enriching themselves. And so Theresa May taking a play out of Arkansas's playbook here. And so that's what Donald Trump is saying. He's saying if they don't really do the Brexit, then it's going to hurt the trade deal and the negotiations that the United States wants to have directly with the UK. We don't want to have, if it's not a real Brexit, then we're essentially just having a European Union, we're subject to the European Union. We don't want to, we want a direct trade deal with the United Kingdom. All right, keep going. This is President Donald Trump.
With the European Union, we're cracking down right now on the European Union because they have not treated the United States fairly on trade. No, if they do that, I would say that would probably end a major trade relationship with the United States.
Okay, so then the next clip here, this is President Trump on Theresa May.
I actually told Theresa May how to do it, but she didn't agree with it. She didn't listen to me.
What did you say?
She didn't listen. No, I told her how to do it. That will be up to her to say. But I told her how to do it. She wanted to go a different route.
Mm. So you would be prepared to walk away if they didn't give you the right terms?
Oh, absolutely. I think what's going on is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's too long. Deals that take too long are never good ones.
Mm. What did you mean by the UK
when a
being
deal takes so long, it's somehow they never work out very well. I did give Theresa, who I like, I did give her my views on what she should do and how she should negotiate. And she didn't follow those views. I would actually say she probably went the opposite way. If you really look, she probably went the opposite way. That's fine. She should negotiate the best way she knows how. But it's too bad what's going on.
Then we have President Trump on the future UK-US trade
deals. The deal
deals.
that she's striking is not what the people voted on. It's a much different deal than the people voted on. it was not the deal that was in the referendum. You know, I've just been hearing this over the last 3 days. I guess you've been just hearing about it over the last 3 years. I know they have a lot of resignations, so a lot of people don't like it. No, but it'll definitely affect trade with the United States, unfortunately in a negative way.
And then here's Trump on Boris Johnson, the guy who resigned
he's a very talented
from
guy.
the cabinet.
I was very saddened to see that he was leaving government. And I hope he goes back in at some point, because I think he's a very, I think he's a great representative for your country. I was very surprised and saddened that he was getting out of government. And you lost some other very good people. Well, I'm not pitting one against the other. I'm just saying I think he'd be a great prime minister. Yeah, I think he's got what it takes, and I think he's got the right attitude to be a great prime minister.
A new prime minister. And then here's Trump on defense.
On Britain's defense spending, Jim Mattis wrote to his counterpart in the UK to say it's no longer good enough for the UK to be spending just 2%. You're our major ally. You need to considerably increase it above 2%. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. No, 2% is not enough. 2%, and some countries don't pay that.
No.
And yet the United States pays 4.2%, is the actual number, not 3.5%. It's 4.2% of a much larger GDP. In fact, the GDP since I've taken over has doubled and tripled. So it's very, you know, it's a very unfair number. No, I think I'm very impressed that he sent that letter. I think that's an exact right letter. I think all the countries in Europe should pay 4%, not 2%. And many of them, like Germany, is only paying 1.1%. And so we protect Germany, and they're only paying 1%, 1.1%. It's, you know, it's very unfair.
And then here is immigration. Trump on
My
immigration.
father Germany, my mother Scotland. So I have great love for countries in Europe. I think what's happened to Europe is a shame. I think the immigration, allowing the immigration to take place in Europe is a shame. I think it changed the fabric of Europe. And unless you act very quickly, it's never going to be what it was. And I don't mean that in a positive way. So I think allowing millions and millions of people to come in to Europe is very, very sad. I think you're losing your culture.
Wow. Let's stop right there. Okay. And then he goes on Trump on the Queen. Now, eventually he calls out the mayor of London and everything else. I mean, you're going to hear this audio. I'm playing this for you because you're going to hear this audio probably throughout the day. There's probably more to get into. But anyway, that's President Donald Trump being interviewed by The Sun there. And, yeah, I mean, it's a savage assessment of what's going on, you know. I mean, he even said that the mayor of London at some point, the mayor of London was essentially just allowing terrorists to come into the city. I mean, you know, all over Europe, all over London, they've got, I mean, the liberal press, they like to try to tell you that the no-go zones and everything else they like to diminish them, if not deny them sometimes. I mean, it's a matter of fact that there are places. It's the equivalent, I'll tell you exactly what it's the equivalent of. It's the equivalent of Barack Obama putting a sign up on U.S. soil by the Mexican border saying, hey, if you go down this particular highway, just know that we can't guarantee your safety. It's the United States government saying, yeah, this is we can't really get, you know, you need to maybe go the northern route. You don't need to go the southern route. Well, essentially where law enforcement is saying, yeah, you know, we can't guarantee equal protection under the law, and even though it's on our own soil. That's the equivalent of what's going on in Europe when you have these no-go zones where you have these little enclaves of I guess what you would say is Islamic radicalism in many cases in the crime that's going on, where the police say, you know what, we're just going to let you kind of set up, we're going to let you govern yourself there, these little pockets, and it's an affront to Western civilization, and that's what Trump is referring to here. You know, when he says Europe has their immigration policies have put Europe in a position where they may lose their culture. Big stuff, big time stuff from President Donald Trump on the international stage. It's driving the left crazy. It's driving the people that believe in multiculturalism crazy. It's driving the people that want to diminish the accomplishments of the United States of America from a historical perspective compared to the rest of the world, and it's driving them nuts, right? I mean, they operate in this realm where it is somehow wrong to say that there are different cultures in this world that have better ideas than some other cultures, and that apparently is wrong to it's wrong to have that worldview now. To say, well, you know what, we don't like this idea. We want to run our society based on these ideas, like, individual freedom and liberty and, a government that attempts to treat it. Here's the thing. Western civilization based on the golden rule, based on critical thought, and that's how you get the concept of freedom, or at least the goal of freedom. Anyway, so the phone number 870-275-9799 this morning. Do we have time for one more? Yeah, one more story here, national story. Peter Strzok interviewed by the House GOP committee, and it was fiery. I watched this yesterday live, and I'm telling you right now, Peter Strzok has just a lot of gall about him. To essentially, come on, we all know, we've seen the text messages and everything else. One of the most fiery exchanges was obviously Trey Gowdy, but then it got to Louis Gohmert. And can we play this audio clip, please? This is Louis Gohmert. It's about a minute clip. Go ahead and play it, Joe, and listen to what he had to say to former FBI agent Peter Strzok and his bias concerning the Clinton investigation and the Russian investigation. Listen to this.
You have come in here and said, I had no bias. And you do it with a straight face. And I watched you in the private testimony you gave. And I told some of the other guys, he is really good. He's lying. He knows, we know he's lying. And he could probably pass polygraph. It's amazing.
Mr. Chairman.
No, this is my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Point of order. This point of order.
No.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
A member of this committee just asserted that this witness, who is under oath and a former agent of the FBI, lied. There is no evidence that. I ask him to withdraw it.
I do not withdraw it. He is not a member of Congress. It's not a violation of the rule. And just as you have been expressing bias through your members about what a hero
there is not a single person on this committee who has ever characterized a witness
gentleman
as
from
lying.
Rhode Island.
Gentleman, it's my time.
That's a disgrace.
Gentleman from Rhode Island will suspend.
No, the disgrace,
Mr.
what this man has done.
The gentleman from
justice,
Texas will suspend for a moment.
There is the disgrace. And it won't be recaptured anytime soon because of the damage you've done to the justice system. And I've talked to FBI agents around the country. You've embarrassed them. You've embarrassed yourself. And I can't help but wonder when I see you looking there with a little smirk, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eye and lie to her about Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous.
Yeah, he was cheating on his wife.
Mr. Chairman, please.
Mr. Chairman, this is intolerable harassment of the witness.
Wrong with that? You need your
Wow.
medication.
The gentleman control.
Well, there you go. That's Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas. From a biblical standpoint, I think it's certain to raise the credibility of saying, "Hey, listen, if you're gonna lie to your wife, then you'd have no problem lying to Congress, right? You know what I'm saying, folks? It's Johnny Cash Friday. We're gonna take a break. No, let's just what do we have to wait a little bit. Have you removed the pause? Okay, well, sorry. Joe says that I have to vamp now, so we're gonna vamp for a little while. I will tell you this seriously though, from the Louis Gohmert perspective, if you are, I think it's a perfectly fair question. If you are gonna lie to your wife, while having an affair, why wouldn't you lie to Congress? It's kind of the same argument as, people saying with the gun control things. It's like, no, we need to have stricter gun control laws. It's like, wait a second, if you're going to murder somebody, clearly you're going to have no problem getting around or breaking gun laws. You won't have any problem at all doing that. All right, we're going to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. Back in a minute.
The only permanent danger to the hope that is America comes from within. It's easy enough to dismiss this as a kind of familiar exhortation. Yet the truth is that even two of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, once learned this lesson late in life. They'd worked so closely together in Philadelphia for independence. But once that was gained and a government was formed, something called partisan politics began to get in the way. After a bitter and divisive campaign, Jefferson defeated Adams for the presidency in 1800. And the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams slipped away to Boston, disappointed, broken-hearted, and bitter. For years, their estrangement lasted. But then, when both had retired, Jefferson at 68 to Monticello and Adams at 76 to Quincy, they began through their letters to speak again to each other. Letters that discussed almost every conceivable subject: gardening, horseback riding, even sneezing as a cure for hiccups, but other subjects as well: the loss of loved ones, the mystery of grief and sorrow, the importance of religion, and of course, the last thoughts, the final hopes of two old men, two great patriarchs for the country that they had helped to found and loved so deeply. It carries me back, Jefferson wrote about correspondence with his co-signer of the Declaration of Independence, to the times when, beset with difficulties and dangers, we were fellow laborers in the same cause, struggling for what is most valuable to man, his right to self-government, laboring always at the same oar, with some wave ever ahead threatening to overwhelm us, and yet passing harmless, we rode through the storm with heart and hand. It was their last gift to us, this lesson in brotherhood, in tolerance for each other, this insight into America's strength as a nation. And when both died on the same day, within hours of each other, that date was July 4th, 50 years exactly after that first gift to us, the Declaration of Independence. My fellow Americans, it falls to us to keep faith with them and all the great Americans of our past. Believe me, if there's one impression I carry with me after the privilege of holding for 5.5 years the office held by Adams, Jefferson, and Lincoln, it is this: that the things that unite us, America's past of which we're so proud, our hopes and aspirations for the future of the world and this much-loved country, these things far outweigh what little divides us. So tonight, we are reaffirmed that Jew and Gentile, we are one nation under God. The black and white, we are one nation indivisible. That Republican and Democrat, we are all Americans. Tonight, with heart and hand, through whatever trial and travail, we pledge ourselves to each other and to the cause of human freedom, a cause that has given light to this land and hope to the world. My fellow Americans, we're known around the world as a confident and a happy people. Tonight, there's much to celebrate and many blessings to be grateful for. So while it's good to talk about serious things, it's just as important and just as...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us on this Johnny Cash Friday. We're up against a hard break, but we've got a lot more news to get to. An hour from now, we'll be getting ready to hear from Congressman Rick Crawford. He'll be calling in. Excited about that. I have an interesting story. When I signed off yesterday, I was talking about how yesterday was my 10-year anniversary. We celebrated with my wife, and I wondered if she was listening. And then I said, happy birthday. And then I said, well, now I hope you're not listening, because you know what she said to me last night while we were at dinner? She looked at me, and we were talking about our anniversary, and she looked at me and she said, happy birthday. And I said, were you listening? She said, no. She made the exact same mistake that I made yesterday when I was trying to wish her happy anniversary on the radio. I told her happy birthday. She looked at me and said happy birthday last night. All right. We'll be back here in just a moment.
American, to have some fun. Now, let's have some fun. Let the celebration begin.
reaching across the world to all whose hearts know the meaning of her life.
From Washington, D.C., CBS News presents an address by John F. Kennedy, President of the United States. The President will speak to members of the American Society of Newspaper Editors who are holding their 39th annual convention at the Statler Hilton Hotel. Originally, the Chief Executive was to have lunched with the editors, but early today he changed his plans, presumably because of the international situation and because he wanted more time to devote to his address. The President met with his cabinet during the morning. The session had been scheduled some time ago, but it's understood that the Cuban situation was discussed. Mr. Kennedy's address this afternoon is expected to deal with both the Cuban and the Laotian situations. The arrangement suggests a speech of major importance. Introducing the President will be Turner Catledge, managing editor of the New York Times and president of the Editors Society. Now here is Mr. Catledge.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Mr. Catledge, members of the American Society, newspaper editors, ladies and gentlemen. The President of a great democracy, such as ours, and the editors of great newspapers, such as yours, owe a common obligation to the people. An obligation to present the facts, to present them with candor, and to present them in perspective. It is with that obligation in mind that I have decided in the last 24 hours to discuss briefly at this time the recent events in Cuba. On that unhappy island, as in so many other arenas of the contest for freedom, the news has grown worse instead of better. I have emphasized before that this was a struggle of Cuban patriots against a Cuban dictator. While we could not be expected to hide our sympathies, we made it repeatedly clear that the armed forces of this country would not intervene in any way. Any unilateral American intervention in the absence of an external attack upon ourselves or an ally would have been contrary to our traditions and to our international obligations. But let the record show that our restraint is not inexhaustible. Should it ever appear that the inter-American doctrine of non-interference merely conceals or excuses a policy of non-action, if the nations of this hemisphere should fail to meet their commitments against outside communist penetration, then I want it clearly understood that this government will not hesitate in meeting its primary obligations, which are to the security of our nation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us on this Johnny Cash Friday. For those of you watching online, I know you're not getting the Johnny Cash music because of some Facebook policies and YouTube policies and things like that. Our terrestrial radio affiliates are still getting the Johnny Cash music, and so we appreciate that. I mean, as is the, I don't know, it's pretty neat. But so what we're doing for our online audience, though on Johnny Cash Fridays, is that we're playing these old presidential speeches that really is I've been going through some of these, getting them ready to show to you. They're very educational. So we were just playing, I believe, a 1980 speech from President Reagan earlier in the broadcast on the 4th of July, and that was a great speech. And now we're playing a 1961 speech from President John F. Kennedy. And there is, I don't know, just a lot of, it's interesting to see what the issues of the day were when you start to talk, or when you start to listen, rather, to these presidents speak in the past. It's very, very educational. So my point is, if you go on to our website, Conduit News, or Facebook.com/Conduit News, or the YouTube channel on Johnny Cash Fridays, you're going to be getting just a little bit different, slightly different type of program. All right, so let's talk about medical pot. Medical cannabis, as they say. Hunter Field with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette reports that the Medical Marijuana Commission has now asked, matter of fact, they voted unanimously to ask the state legislature to approve a rule that would allow the panel to outsource its application scoring. Now, this is now different. They have moved on. They've moved on from who's going to get to grow. Who's going to get to grow it? Who's going to get to plant it and grow it? And now they have to figure out who gets to sell it. Now, remember, there was allegations of bribery. There was reports that came out that showed that you had one application that had copied the other application's homework and it scored higher than the other, or vice versa. And then you had other people basically saying that it was just so arbitrary. And, of course, Conduit News has been reporting that if you have a situation like we do, which is, the government's going to pick winners and losers and who gets to grow what is otherwise an illegal product, then, of course, the only way to go about this is to select those companies that have an inside track because they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And that is just human nature. And that's why government needs to be limited and doesn't need these kinds of powers, in my opinion. They don't need to regulate this stuff in this way. And that's what the people voted on, though. The amendment they voted on for medical marijuana was to ask the state of Arkansas to regulate medical marijuana. And so this is the nightmare that we now have. This is the nightmare that we now have. I mean, it is just it should, if you're a conservative or limited government person, this should confirm your worldview all day long. Well, so now that they got so much flack for the Medical Marijuana Commission, how they scored the growers, now they're saying, well, maybe we don't want to score we don't want to score the people that want to actually sell it in the dispensaries. We're going to outsource that to a consultant. And the Gazette writes that the 5 commissioners planned initially to grade the 203 dispensary proposals themselves using the same merit scoring system they used to evaluate 83 applications for marijuana growing permits. That process, however, was delayed and marred by a series of lawsuits and allegations from unsuccessful applicants. I mean, it was a capricious process, right? I mean, it really was. Thursday's debate centered around whether a consulting company would be able to grade the applications more quickly. A staff attorney also said that hiring a consultant would likely shield the process from legal challenges. Quote, "It's a tremendous amount of work, and we've been put so far behind because of all the things that have gone on," said Commissioner Dr. Carlos Roman. Okay, so here we go. Let me think this through. I know so. I feel like I witnessed and I know so much that I just wish I could just download it into everybody's brain out there listening. So essentially what we have here is the commission saying if we hire a consultant, it's going to be independent and it will shield us from lawsuits. Folks, that is not true. I mean, the lawsuit part may be true, but the notion is this process isn't corrupt. The government can be this arbiter of of justice and fairness when we're trying to regulate and give special privileges to those who dot all their I's and cross all their T's, and there's nothing to see here. Let's now, but let's have the appearance that we're fixing it. Let's get the outside consultant, right? Let's get the outside consultant. Let's have them grade the papers, and then we'll be able to say, okay, everything's fine. It's out of our hands, and they now get to relieve themselves of any responsibility. I mean, what is the Medical Marijuana Commission for if we're going to have these guys grade the papers? Now, I know there's every situation here is a no-win situation, but you see, the state would have you believe that when they hire a consultant, that the consultant is independent and doesn't follow a list of instructions that the state gives them. So if you're a consultant and you're getting a government contract, and so this is the government now partnering with a privately owned entity, you want to get your money, right? You want to get paid if you're that private consultant. And so you're going to have something called the customer's always right. And you're going to have that philosophy. You're going to want to give the best customer service you can to the government. In this case, the government that they would be answering to would be maybe in some case eventually the legislature, the legislative council, but really the Medical Marijuana Commission. The Medical Marijuana Commission, in all likelihood, is going to instruct the consultant on the merits, the high points, the standards that they want the dispensaries to meet. And to think that that's not the case is crazy. Yet it'll insulate them for lawsuits, but I just want you to understand we've seen what happens when the state hires a consultant. And let's go back to Medicaid expansion, right? So when Governor Asa Hutchinson came out and said back in 2015, and he said that the private option, Obamacare private option, the very word private option had become politically toxic, and then he renamed the program to Arkansas Works, and then we were told by his nephew, Jim Hendren, that we were going to end the program. The conservatives were told that this is the way to end the program, even though in the text of his bill it said that the task force that would be set up had to keep the program, even though that's all true. Right? So what did they do? They hired a consultant. They hired a consultant to advise them. And it was really an effort to insulate themselves from political consequences. Oh, the consultant says we have to do this. Well, we got it. These are experts and we're paying them. Okay. Well, as part of the contract for the consulting firm, okay, all through 2015 and all through 2016, as part of that, they gave them the stipulations on, we want you to study it based on these parameters. We want you to study it based on trying to get to this conclusion or conclusions inside the goalposts that the task force on healthcare Medicaid set for them, right? So I just want you to know this commission can hire as many consultants as they want, but ultimately when the government contracts with a private entity, they get to write the contract, and the private entity is going to do what they are tasked with doing because they want to make that money. They want to get paid. So they want to please whoever it is they're working for. They're not working for you and me. They're working for whatever bureaucrat or politician is in power and telling them what to do. You have to understand that. This is the Gazette just reports, hey, outside. But you have to read between the lines. You have to read between the lines. You have to understand how government works and how they think. And now that the Medical Marijuana Commission has been caught, in a sense, not that any one person did something wrong. I'm just saying they have been kind of snared by bad publicity, at the very least. Okay, this is bad publicity. You have the people that voted for medical marijuana, by the way, that still can't get any marijuana. They're starting to get angry and upset. I read the Gazette piece the other day where they, kept somebody's identity anonymous, saying, look, I need this medicine for pain, and so I'm buying it illegally right now because I'm tired of waiting on the Medical Marijuana Commission, to get their act together. So people are starting to get upset. But the process is a corrupt process. Let me say it again. The process is a corrupt process. I don't see how it can be anything but a corrupt process, whether they score the applications themselves, whether, we're being asked to ignore the conflicts of interest of the members on the board and their connections to people that have applications, whether they're attorneys or whatnot. If you hire an outside consultant, it's still going to be, it's going to actually, if they hire an outside consultant, it will be harder to pin down if there's any bias or any inconsistencies. But it will be the commission or some lawmaker somewhere telling the consultant how to grade the papers. The government is still going to be the ones deciding how to grade the papers and the applications. And so it won't surprise me at all if we have a marijuana task force soon. Who knows? Anyway. Oh, and by the way, I mean, we keep having these allegations of bribes, which we know there was an allegation. Somebody tried to bribe a medical marijuana commissioner. We found that out in the lawsuit, in the discovery or the disclosure aspect of it. And yet, it's always, is that now legal? Is that now fine? Is there an investigation into who did the bribing? You have the person that was attempted to be bribed, but there's got to be a bribee. Who's the briber? You have the bribee and the briber. Who's the briber? I still want to know who the briber was in the Mike Maggio case with the nursing home owner. I mean, we know who it, but does the government care? I mean, we had a guy plead guilty to taking a bribe, but we've had no follow-up on anybody, the government being interested at all in the briber. Isn't that weird? You got a guy, you have a former judge, serving a sentence in jail for pleading guilty to bribery and lowering a nursing home court judgment, and yet no one seems to care about who the briber is. It's been, Joe says maybe they're in the middle of, investigation. Yeah. It's been so long. I mean, I think slow justice. I think when the justice system works as slow as it's working right now in Arkansas, it's an injustice. I really do. That's true. There could be a lot we don't know, but still, I mean, come on. What is this? What are we doing here? Some of this stuff is blatant. This isn't like Al Capone that on paper, on the books everything looks fine, and so they've got to figure out a way to get him for tax evasion. We got this little, we know you're murdering all these people and you're the king of all these, organized crime and everything else, but we can't get you. We can't. Oh, we found that you're not paying your taxes properly. Come on, this is blatant. This isn't like we have to let's start. I don't know. If you go look at that Peter Strzok interview yesterday, I mean, that was just a joke. Maybe we're to the point where nobody cares if the people have confidence in their justice system. Maybe we're to that point. I don't know. The number 870-275-9799. We are going to take a break. It is Johnny Cash Friday, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Should that time ever come, we do not intend to be lectured on intervention by those whose character was stamped for all time on the bloody streets of Budapest. Nor would we expect or accept the same outcome which this small band of gallant Cuban refugees must have known that they were chancing, determined as they were against heavy odds to pursue their courageous attempts to regain their island's freedom. But Cuba is not an island unto itself, and our concern is not ended by mere expressions of non-intervention or regret. This is not the first time in either ancient or recent history that a small band of freedom fighters has engaged the armor of totalitarianism. It is not the first time that communist tanks have rolled over gallant men and women fighting to redeem the independence of their homeland. Nor is it by any means the final episode in the eternal struggle of liberty against tyranny anywhere on the face of the globe, including Cuba itself. Mr. Castro has said that these were mercenaries. According to press reports, the final message to be relayed from the refugee forces on the beach came from the rebel.
What does the name Triple R have to do with bail bonds? Well, the Triple R stands for reliable, respectful, and relentless. When in need of bail bonds, you only need one number. Call 866-593-7457. Even if Triple R can't help, they'll take the time to provide you with the numbers of other bond companies in your area that can be of service. That's why they're the hub of Arkansas bail bonds. Triple R Bail Bonds has an app, they're paperless, and always reliable, respectful, and relentless.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Should that time ever come, we do not intend to be lectured on intervention by those whose character was stamped for all time on the bloody streets of Budapest. Nor would we expect or accept the same outcome which this small band of gallant Cuban refugees must have known that they were chancing, determined as they were against heavy odds to pursue their courageous attempts to regain their island's freedom. But Cuba is not an island unto itself, and our concern is not ended by mere expressions of non-intervention or regret. This is not the first time in either ancient or recent history that a small band of freedom fighters has engaged the armor of totalitarianism. It is not the first time that communist tanks have rolled over gallant men and women fighting to redeem the independence of their homeland. Nor is it by any means the final episode in the eternal struggle of liberty against tyranny anywhere on the face of the globe, including Cuba itself. Mr. Castro has said that these were mercenaries. According to press reports, the final message to be relayed from the refugee forces on the beach came from the rebel commander when asked if he wished to be evacuated. His answer was, "I will never leave this country." That is not the reply of a mercenary. He has gone now to join in the mountains countless other guerrilla fighters who are equally determined that the dedication of those who gave their lives shall not be forgotten, and that Cuba must not be abandoned to the communists. And we do not intend to abandon it either. The Cuban people have not yet spoken their final piece, and I have no doubt that they and the Revolutionary Council, led by Dr. Cardona, and members of the families of the Revolutionary Council, I am informed by the doctor yesterday, are involved themselves in the islands, will continue to speak up for a free and independent Cuba. Meanwhile, we will not accept Mr. Castro's attempt.
It's Johnny Cash Friday. Welcome back to the program. Thank you guys so much for listening. Coming up at the top of the next hour, I want to explore a little Arkansas story here that's developed on Twitter with State Representative Charlie Collins and the anti-gunners Moms Demand Action. I'm not sure if it was if Charlie Collins was trolling. He did kind of write an apologetic tweet, but I think it's pretty funny. We'll talk about that. There's also an opinion special in the Gazette a couple of days ago, Dana D. Kelly, about how partisan the confirmation process with Supreme Court nominees has become at the federal level. And he has some statistics in there that we just have to go over. Also, we have Cindy Gillespie, the head of DHS, formerly of the international law firm of Dentons, being publicly criticized by lawmakers for not showing up to a hearing about some, I guess, about an audit in her agency, DHS. And we'll give you that story as well next hour, and an interview with Congressman Rick Crawford. He'll be calling in at 7:33. The Arkansas Times reports that Max Brantley, headline here, Big Brother Walmart, and it references a BuzzFeed report about technology that Walmart has recently patented. Yeah, I know, BuzzFeed, I know. Joe's like, we're getting our news from the Arkansas Times here too, so... I mean, they're a very liberal outlet, so I know they're a liberal outlet, but that's why they're reading BuzzFeed. We know, BuzzFeed is pretty awful. But anyway, they are reporting that Walmart patented technology that has to do with audio sensors that could allow them to monitor work productivity. So they want to know what their workers are doing, right? But what about the people that shop and, are looking at products and stuff like that? Wouldn't you also be able to listen to your customers and their conversations? Of course you could. There's no indication that the technology is being used, according to this report, right now. But they do have patents, and I just thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Could it be in the future? I mean, if we're honest, here's the thing. With what we're figuring out about cell phones and the microphones in our cell phones and our laptops and everything else and all these other devices, I mean, if they want to, they're recording everything right now, and there's no way to even know it. I mean, go look up on YouTube the people who have tested the Facebook, the spooky Facebook things where you talk about something totally random, and all of a sudden it appears, and it's totally random. It kind of happened to me the other day. I thought I was, we were buying tuna steaks, and we were talking about how we can't wait to eat tuna steaks, and then all of a sudden on our YouTube channel, our YouTube feed, we get this big thing about this tuna king in Japanese and how he's this amazing examiner of tuna. Anyway.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
To blame this nation for the hatred which his one-time supporters now regard his repression. But there are, from this sobering episode, useful lessons for us all to learn. Some may be still obscure and await further information. Some are clear today. First, it is clear that the forces of communism are not to be underestimated in Cuba or anywhere else in the world. The advantages of a police state, its use of mass terror and arrest to prevent the spread of free dissent, cannot be overlooked by those who expect the fall of every fanatic tyrant. If the self-discipline of the free cannot match the iron discipline of the mailed fist in economic, political, scientific, and all the other kinds of struggle, as well as the military, then the peril to freedom will continue to rise. Secondly, it is clear that this nation, in concert with all the free nations of this hemisphere, must take an ever closer and more realistic look at the menace of external communist intervention and domination in Cuba. The American people are not complacent about Iron Curtain tanks and planes less than 90 miles from their shore. But a nation of Cuba's size is less a threat to our survival than it is a base for subverting the survival of other free nations throughout the hemisphere. It is not primarily our interest or our security, but theirs, which is now today in the greater peril. It is for their sake, as well as our own, that we must show our will. The evidence is clear and the hour is late. We and our Latin friends will have to face the fact that we cannot postpone any longer the real issue of survival of freedom in this hemisphere itself. On that issue, unlike perhaps some others, there can be no middle ground. Together we must build a hemisphere where freedom can flourish and where any free nation under outside attack of any kind can be assured that all of our resources stand ready to respond to any request for assistance. Third and finally, it is clearer than ever that we face a relentless struggle in every corner of the globe that goes far beyond the clash of armies or even nuclear armaments. The armies are there and in large number. The nuclear armaments are there. But they serve primarily as the shield behind which subversion, infiltration, and a host of other tactics steadily advance, picking off vulnerable areas one by one in situations which do not permit our own armed intervention. Power is the hallmark of this offensive. Power and discipline and deceit. The legitimate discontent of yearning people is exploited. The legitimate trappings of self-determination are employed. But once in power, all talk of discontent is repressed. All self-determination disappears. And the promise of a revolution of hope is betrayed, as in Cuba, into a reign of terror. Those who on instruction staged automatic riots in the streets of free nations over the efforts of a small group of young Cubans to regain their freedom should recall the long roll call of refugees who cannot now go back to Hungary, to North Korea, to North Vietnam, to East Germany, or to Poland, or to any of the other lands from which a steady stream of refugees pours forth in eloquent testimony to the cruel oppression now holding sway in their homeland. We dare not fail to see the insidious nature of this new and deeper struggle. We dare not fail to grasp the new concepts, the new tools, the new sense of urgency we will need to combat it, whether in Cuba or South Vietnam. And we dare not fail to realize
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. The number 870-275-9799, and yes, it is Johnny Cash Friday, and we always appreciate. Oh, there we go. There we go. Johnny Cash Friday, day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day and the week. I want to start with this. I saw this yesterday. Live fire, headline from the Arkansas Times, live fire from Charlie Collins. He's a state representative from Fayetteville, a member of the Republican Party. And the founder of Moms Demand Action, who in her Twitter handle says that she is the bane of the NRA's existence. Her name is Shannon Watts. Of course, Shannon Watts, the founder of Moms Demand Action, they're radical anti-Second Amendment. I got news for you. The NRA doesn't really care anything about you because they know that the issue of being pro-Second Amendment has the vast support of the people of this country. The vast support. But there was an exchange that was going on between State Representative Charlie Collins. Go ahead and show this, Joe. For some reason, my screen is messing up here. So they show this tweet. Now scroll down a little bit. Okay, so somebody on Twitter named Trousers at Okie Desperation writes, "Why can't my child carry a gun to class?" ? And State Representative Charlie Collins responds, retweets and comments, and I'm assuming this is him trolling. He says, "Federal law prohibits it. Call your congressman." Call your congressman if you want your child to carry a gun to class. And that set off Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts. And she retweeted it, or she screenshotted it, retweeted it. An actual Arkansas lawmaker, she wrote, "Ladies and gentlemen," an actual Arkansas lawmaker. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't hear what you're saying, Joe. I've got too much music going on in my ear. And so go to this Charlie Collins tweet, because eventually he says, "Hello, Shannon Watts. Nice to hear from you. No, Arkansas concealed carry law has worked extremely well for decades, and I'm quite happy with it, including age requirement equals 21. After multiple Arkansas politics tweets at me about K through 12 student carry, I merely pointed out feds made K through 12 gun law." So I'm thinking maybe he wasn't trolling at first, or maybe he was at first, but then there was, because Shannon Watts, she tweeted, I'm sure everybody freaked out on the radical anti-gun left that they want to confiscate your guns is what they want to do. I mean, that's the left's end goal here. They don't think anybody should have guns. I know people at Moms Demand for Action, so no, we don't really. Well, yeah, you do. I've had some Moms Demand people before contact me on Twitter saying, we're not anti-Second Amendment. Yeah, you guys are. You are anti-Second Amendment. You probably, if you think you're not anti-Second Amendment and you're one of these radical anti-gunners like Moms Demand Action, you probably believe in the, you're probably like, I know, no, well-regulated militia. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how they say we're not anti-Second Amendment, because they ignore the context of the 18th century language and what well-regulated militia actually means. And of course, they're going to ignore the whole point of that Second Amendment, which is the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not is extremely powerful language if you know about law making or law crafting in the 18th century. It is still today. Shall not is still today. Very conclusive language. Anyway, so that's what's going on, at least from it's getting some national attention, I think. at least on Twitter, from people who maybe don't necessarily follow Arkansas politics. Why can't my kid carry his gun to class? It's a federal law. Call your congressman. And that just set the left just on fire. They're just so crazy, folks. They're absolutely nuts. Okay, so moving on. Here's another tweet. Uncle, nephew, and nephew tweeted this. Now, listen, I want to be clear here. I have nothing to do with this. People have called, Paul, are you Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew on Twitter? No, this is a parody we made. We made a parody on Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew. Yes, well, that is me. I mean, we wrote the thing. That's what happened. I don't know who Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew is. I have tried. I have cornered people. I have suspected some people. And I've cornered them. And they deny it. And they, convincingly at least, I'm convinced, these people that I've asked, they say this is, so I don't know who this is. Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew tweets, after reading the Arkansas Online story about Monday's Arkansas legislative audit hearing, we salute honorary niece Cindy Gillespie's use of Senator A's don't show up strategy that he famously used representing preferred family health care while being paid $9,000 per month. Speaks talking about, obviously, the governor's nephew, Jeremy Hutchinson. So if you go over to the actual article, there's a real example here of leadership in this article. So Cindy Gillespie just didn't show up, even though she's being paid. What does she get paid? What, $280,000 a year? Legislators reviewing an audit into record-keeping problems and poorly tracked spending at the Department of Human Services. The head of is Cindy Gillespie, formerly of the international law firm Denton's. She also was Mitt Romney's health care advisor when he was crafting Romney Care, which is what Obamacare is based on. It's just important you understand her history. Obamacare is based on Romney Care. When Mitt Romney challenged Barack Obama for the presidency in 2012, he didn't really have a leg to stand on criticizing Obamacare because Barack Obama rightfully could look to Mitt and say, we based this on what you thought was a good idea when you were governor of Massachusetts. How convenient for Barack Obama, by the way, to get an opponent in the Republican Party who was the embodiment of his signature domestic achievement, Obamacare. How convenient for Barack Obama. Anyway, so Cindy Gillespie is here in Arkansas on assignment. This is my speculation, and I know people say that she's very nice. I'm sure she is nice, but in my opinion, based on her former work at this international law firm that is essentially lobbying for, global uniform policy, and that's what it is, I think she's here on assignment to cement this concept of dependency on government for our health care, whether we never get to that eventual goal in the next 5-10 years, but we certainly are going to muddy up the system to where, insurance companies will start begging for more regulation. When Donald Trump is now withdrawing these payments, these illegal payments that a court said the federal government cannot pay these insurance companies back for their losses. And so Donald Trump is stopping the payments, and the insurance companies like, well, prices are going to go up and all this other stuff. Eventually you're going to have what socialism brings, and that's your private companies. Your private companies, and insurance companies aren't really private anymore. You can't tell where they end and the government begins. But the goal here with any industry is to collapse it by getting your private companies to beg the government for regulations. And that's where we are headed if we don't do something different. But Cindy Gillespie decides to not show up to this meeting. I'm not going to show up to this meeting about an audit about the things the agency that I'm the head of is doing wrong and poorly and misspending money and things like that. So at the time, the Legislative Joint Auditing Committee kicked the report down to its Medicaid subcommittee. So the committee here that she didn't show up for was actually the Medicaid subcommittee. I'm sure she's like, it's just a subcommittee. On top of reviewing the state audit, lawmakers on the subcommittee received a letter from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which cited an Office of the Inspector General's report that also found problems with record keeping here in the state of Arkansas at DHS? What is this big salary Cindy Gillespie's making? What is it going to pay? I mean, how is it being used? We're paying this elaborate salary to somebody from an international law firm here on assignment, and you just got to wonder, what gives? Where's the accountability in government? Don't worry, they did send former lawmaker and former legislator who had a position specifically created for him at DHS, former State Representative Kelly Link, now the legislative liaison between DHS and legislators. He was there at the subcommittee to discuss the steps the department had taken to address the concerns in the report. Those responses included a new internal plan for tracking agency reports and implementing a federal reporting system for Medicaid and the Children's Health and Insurance Program. Quote, "We will make mistakes," Link said. Kelly Link, the link between DHS bureaucrats and the people's representatives. We will make mistakes. We don't want to make the same mistakes twice. Wow. The vice chairman of the committee, State Senator Linda Collins Smith, a Republican for Pocahontas, said she had been upset that Gillespie did not attend the April meeting and had sent a request to have Gillespie attend this week. Gillespie was not in attendance. Then that Senator Terry Rice, Republican from Waldron, he chimed in, said, quote, "Is there some reason our director doesn't see fit to at least come here and say we're on top of it?" Gillespie was in Little Rock on Tuesday, according to a department spokesperson who said the director is routinely invited to all legislative committee meetings regarding her department. You have to say that with your eyes closed to really get the full effect of probably what was going on. Just my imagination. That's how I would imagine. In this case, she put together a strong team of people to address audit's concerns. I can't close my eyes and read it at the same time. And felt it was important to those individuals. The subject matter experts be at the table said Marcy Manley. Marcy Manley said that in an email. The co-chairman of the Medicaid subcommittee, State Representative Dan Sullivan, a Republican from Jonesboro, said the group will meet again in September or October to discuss the audit, and he said he hoped Gillespie would attend. Kelly Link, quote, "We got the message loud and clear." Good. That's good. That's good. He got the message. Here's the thing. He's the liaison, so he's like an emissary. He's like a messenger. So he's going to take the messages from the subcommittee, and he's going to go to Cindy Gillespie, and he's going to tell her what they said, what their thoughts are. It's a model of government efficiency if you think about it. If you're skeptical about it, you haven't thought about it long enough. You just need to keep thinking about it. Eventually, you'll come around. Here's an example of leadership, though, from conservatives at the Marble Palace. Senator Linda Collins Smith, Senator Terry Rice, State Representative Dan Sullivan. Three examples of conservative leadership in action, trying to hold these bureaucracies accountable. So that's pretty good. I just want to publicly thank them. That's what I'm trying to say. We have a lawsuit that has been filed about the tort reform, the bad tort reform that's on the ballot. It's you want me to get this one to come back? Okay, we're going to go to break right now, and I'm going to tell you about a lawsuit that's been filed to remove Issue 1, the bad tort reform bill, off the ballot. We'll have that for you when we come back. It's Johnny Cash Friday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. It's Conduit News Radio.
That this struggle is taking place every day without fanfare in thousands of villages and markets, day and night, and in classrooms all over the globe. The message of Cuba, of layoffs, of the rising din of communist voices in Asia and Latin America, these messages are all the same. The complacent, the self-indulgent, the soft societies are about to be swept away with the debris of history. Only the strong, only the industrious, only the determined, only the courageous, only the visionary who determine the real nature of our struggle can possibly survive. No greater task faces this country or this administration. No other challenge is more deserving of our every effort and energy. Too long we have fixed our eyes on traditional military needs, on armies prepared to cross borders, on missiles poised for flight. Now it should be clear that this is no longer enough, that our security may be lost piece by piece, country by country, without the firing of a single missile or the crossing of a single border. We intend to profit from this lesson. We intend to re-examine and reorient our forces of all kinds, our tactics, and our institutions here in this community. We intend to intensify our efforts for a struggle in many ways more difficult than war, where disappointment will often accompany us. For I am convinced that we in this country and in the free world possess the necessary resources and the skill and the added strength that comes from a belief in the freedom of man. And I am equally convinced that history will record the fact that this bitter struggle reached its climax in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. Let me then make clear, as the President of the United States, that I am determined upon our system's survival and success, regardless of the cost and regardless of the peril.
Thank you, Mr.
My fellow Americans, in a few moments the celebration will begin here in New York Harbor. It's going to be quite a show. I was just looking over the preparations and thinking about a saying that we had back in Hollywood about never doing a scene with kids or animals because they'd steal the scene every time. So you can rest assured I wouldn't even think about trying to compete with a fireworks display, especially on the 4th of July. My remarks tonight will be brief, but it's worth remembering that all the celebration of this day is rooted in history. It's recorded that shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed in Philadelphia, celebrations took place throughout the land, and many of the former colonists, they were just starting to call themselves Americans, set off cannons and marched in fife and drum parades. What a contrast with the sober scene that has taken place a short time earlier in Independence Hall. 56 men came forward to sign the parchment. It was noted at the time that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. And that was more than rhetoric. Each of those men knew the penalty for high treason to the crown. We must all hang together, Benjamin Franklin said, or assuredly we will all hang separately. And John Hancock, it is said, wrote his signature in large script so King George could see it without his spectacles. They were brave. They stayed brave through all the bloodshed of the coming years. Their courage created a nation built on a universal claim to human dignity, on the proposition that every man, woman, and child had a right to a future of freedom. For just a moment, let us listen to the words again. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
All right, ladies
Last
and gentlemen.
night, when we rededicated...
A few of your comments. Stephanie says, Moms Demand Action is a socialist group. David on Facebook writing, haha, that was a savage retweet. Bob writes, how can anyone take Moms Demand Action seriously? Stephanie again. I'm sorry, no. Somebody said just good morning. Tim writes, so glad you are covering this on the Cindy Gillespie thing. Shelley, interesting. Gary, but she's the governor's hire. You know, that's interesting. Technically, Gary, you're right. She is the governor's hire. How do you know somebody like Cindy Gillespie? Like, how does Cindy Gillespie from an international law firm called Dentons, D-E-N-T-O-N-S, look it up. How does that, I mean, is that somebody, do you think Asa actively goes and seeks her out? I mean, he hires her. I'm just curious, like, how did that even come? To me, it seems, and I know Governor Hutchinson has a long history in Washington, D.C., and, you know, the people in the swamp, they definitely know, you know, you definitely make relationships that last a lifetime. I get that. But how does that happen? Like, how, you know, it's I don't know, it's almost like, no, you're kind of given the name in a way. Like, this is who you're going to hire is one way it could happen. Then it could just be a relationship and said, hey, you know, I'd like for you to come in and be the DHS secretary. Tim writing, I can't believe this story on the millions that are missing in DHS. I can't believe this story doesn't have more traction. Millions missing, and we in Arkansas are in danger, according to reports, of losing federal funding because we're mismanaging, according to the audit and according to the national, what is it, the Inspector General looking in the Government Accountability Office, I think is what it is. Anyway, so it is a big story. It is a big story. Folks, there has been a lawsuit filed by David Couch to throw Issue 1 off of the ballot. Essentially, according to John Moritz, he's saying that the proposed amendment actually has 4 different ones lumped into it. And so because it's a amendment that has multiple issues in that it shouldn't be considered, shouldn't be an amendment to the Constitution is what he's saying. I don't know if this has any traction or not. I'm not really sure. I don't think we should count on it. I think if you disagree with Issue 1 is bad tort reform and you think that it's bad, it's great for nursing home owners and it's bad for the people, it's bad for it's bad for the legislature to get to write rules of evidence for the courtrooms and the amount of special interest that, if you think it's bad, I think we just got to vote it down. And I think we've got to educate people to vote it down. David Couch, he's the one that filed the lawsuit on behalf of former Pulaski County Circuit Judge Marion Humphrey, alleged that Issue 1 is essentially 4 different amendments that voters will have only a single choice on. We'll see what happens. State Chamber of Commerce, who abandoned their mission to look out for small businesses long ago, is... Well, the state chamber is coming out saying, lawyers are going to sue. That's trial lawyers do what trial lawyers do. They sue. It's very interesting stuff. Again, I side with the Family Council on this. They don't think Issue 1 is a pro-life issue. They think it's anti-life because of what it does to our most vulnerable at the end of life. So protecting life from moment of conception to natural death. Back in a moment.
Miss Liberty and relit her torch. We reflected on all the millions who came here in search of the dream of freedom, inaugurated in Independence Hall. We reflected, too, on their courage in coming great distances and settling in a foreign land and then passing on to their children and their children's children. The hope symbolized in this statue here just behind us. The hope that is America. It is a hope that someday every people and every nation of the world will know the blessings of liberty. And it's the hope of millions all around the world. In the last few years, I've spoken at Westminster to the Mother of Parliaments, at Versailles, where French kings and world leaders have made war and peace. I've been to the Vatican in Rome, the Imperial Palace in Japan, and the ancient city of Beijing. I've seen the beaches of Normandy and stood again with those boys of Pointe du Hoc, who long ago scaled the heights, and with, at that time, Lisa Zanetta Hen, who was at Omaha Beach for the father she loved. The father who had once dreamed of seeing again the place where he and so many brave others had landed on D-Day. But he had died before he could make that trip, and she made it for him. And Dad, she'd said, I'll always be proud. And I've seen the successors to these brave men. The young Americans in uniform all over the world. Young Americans like you here tonight, who man the mighty USS Kennedy and the Iowa and the other ships of the line. I can assure you, you out there who are listening, that these young people are like their fathers and their grandfathers, just as willing, just as brave, and we can be just as proud. But our prayer tonight is that the call for their courage will never come, and that it's important for us, too, to be brave. Not so much the bravery of the battlefield, I mean the bravery of brotherhood. All through our history, our presidents and leaders have spoken of national unity and warned us that the real obstacle to moving forward the boundaries of freedom, the only permanent danger to the hope that is America, comes from within. It's easy enough to dismiss this as a kind of familiar exhortation. Yet the truth is that even two of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, once learned this lesson late in life. They'd worked so closely together in Philadelphia for independence. But once that was gained and a government was formed, something called partisan politics began to get in the way. After a bitter and divisive campaign, Jefferson defeated Adams for the presidency in 1800. And the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams slipped away to Boston, disappointed, broken-hearted, and bitter. For years, their estrangement lasted. But then, when both had retired, Jefferson at 68 to Monticello and Adams at 76 to Quincy, they began through their letters to speak again to each other. Letters that discussed almost every conceivable subject: gardening, horseback riding, even sneezing as a cure for hiccups, but other subjects as well: the loss of loved ones, the mystery of grief and sorrow, the importance of religion, and of course, the last thoughts, the final hopes of two old men, two great patriots.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program.
Thanks
Thanks so much for being with us. It is Johnny Cash Friday. Welcome back to the program. We have Congressman Rick Crawford on the line. Rick, welcome back, sir. Thanks, as always.
Hey, you do this all the time on Friday, so I'm listening to your bumper music, and I'm getting into Johnny Cash, and then you make me talk.
I know. Well, you know what I was thinking? We always say with Johnny Cash Friday, we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news of the day. And you're the news. And oftentimes people, oftentimes when I get to the news, they're like, oh, we want to listen to more Johnny Cash. And so, yeah, it's kind of a disadvantage sometimes,
yeah.
to be on during that day. Hey, let me ask you this, Rick. Your band, Triple Nickel, do you guys ever do any Johnny Cash covers?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, of course, everybody does. Folsom Prison Blues, that kind of thing. Yeah. You kind of got to do that. But yeah, we do a couple. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, so what's going on, Rick? Are you in D.C. now?
I am. Yeah, we are in session today, and it's a probe season, so it's a busy time of the year when we're trying to get, basically get all the bills paid, for the next fiscal year. And believe it or not, I mean, we're making good progress on our approach bills. We're on schedule, on track, and everything. And from what I understand, the Senate's actually doing something for a change, and so that's good news. We're on track to maybe get these things done.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, and that's how long has it been since we've actually kind of had regular order when it comes to the budgeting process?
1994, I think.
Oh gosh!
I mean, you got to laugh to keep from crying. It's really kind of sad. But yeah, it's as I understand it, 1994 was the last time that we got all 12 appropriations bills through both chambers, conferenced, and signed. So what we end up with is sometimes a portion. We get a few of them done, then we do an omnibus appropriations bill as a catch-all to clean up, or something like that. And what we've seen so much of in the last few years is these continuing resolutions. And so, I'm hoping that'll change this time around.
Yeah. I've been following a little bit of, what's going on with the trade. And I know we had you on maybe a couple months ago talking about, these different tariffs and things like that. Are there any new developments, any new concerns that you have with what's going on?
Yeah, I think there's really kind of something that escaped my attention, but really I think it's worth sharing, and that is that if you view the tariffs in context of tax reform, what that means. And so what we're seeing is that because of our tax reform, because now we are a more competitive market in the global space, because we have fewer U.S. businesses wanting to locate offshore, and because we have more U.S. businesses that are located offshore, either coming back or repatriating their dollars to invest in the United States, it's empowering our economy, and the effect that it's having on the Chinese economy is really it's a pretty chilling effect. And so if you combine that with tariffs, this is why China is in a panic about tariffs. And so when we say tariffs, from the trade standpoint here in the United States, people tend to freak out and they tend to panic. And thinking back to my ag econ class at Arkansas State University, tariffs were inherently bad. We can't do tariffs because that's bad for U.S. agriculture. But then at the same time, we talk about terms like inelastic or elastic demand. Well, the demand in China is decidedly inelastic. They have to have soybeans, and there's only a certain number of them out there, and we're a top 3 exporter. And so, in the short term, what you've seen is a drop in the price. But what's taking place now is these countries are scooping up U.S. soybeans, and we haven't even gotten to harvest yet. So I think what you're seeing is that there's a really incredible amount of pressure on the Chinese economy. I think they have been, sort of what I call economic saber rattling now, and have done for quite some time. They're a belligerent actor in economically. They're a belligerent actor militarily, politically, and otherwise. And so, it's really about time that we decided, hey, we're going to get in the war too. Quite frankly, China has been at war with us for at least 20 years. Ever since they've been in the WTO, you'd think that would have somewhat of a stabilizing effect in terms of our relationship with China. But in fact, it hasn't, because the WTO allows them to get away with a lot of shenanigans. Like, for example, manipulating their currency. They refuse to, they float their currency for their own benefit so that they can improve their buying power and decrease our buying power. So it's not a two-way street. It's not fair. It's not all just about trade. It's about monetary policy. It's about tax policy. And all of these things combined seem to be coming to a head right now. And at the end of the day, what we need to understand is China has to have us in a variety of ways, and it's certainly true with soybeans. They have to have U.S. soybeans. They just can't get along without them. So whether or not we sell directly to China or is really not the question. U.S. soybeans will go to China. They're already doing that now. They're going through, purchases from Brazil and Argentina and other nations that are buying at a discount, because right now we're trading at a discount of anywhere from $1.50 to $1.95 against Brazilian soybeans. But they're buying them, and it's going into China. And the other thing is the European Union is buying U.S. soybeans, and that's always been a tough sell. The EU is difficult to deal with on a good day. And so for them to come in and buy, they're the number 2 importer of soybeans in the world by a distant margin. China imports 95 million, or expected to import 95 million tons this year. That's up 26% from 4 years ago. The EU is at 14.5 million tons, so it's a very distant second, but still a significant destination for U.S. soybeans, and the fact that they're buying U.S. soybeans now is also good.
I mean, this is really great information. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford, and he certainly is very knowledgeable about how this, I say trade war, only because I'm, corrupted by these headlines as well. We've got the mainstream media, they use these words like trade war. I think they do it to try to, really kind of, diminish the positive aspects of this and how we do actually have to start reasserting ourselves so that America can get a better deal. That seems to be what the president is doing here. He's trying to alter what has been an imbalance that it seems to have grown over the decades. Recently, we played this at the first of the hour. We talked about the president and what he said to the Sun paper about, the Brexit deal. And, you mentioned it's hard to negotiate with the EU. The president said yesterday to British media that if they don't actually have a clean Brexit and actually allow this to happen, it's going to jeopardize the potential trade deal, direct trade deal with the UK and the United States, because if Theresa May just tries to rename whatever their association is with the European Union and it's basically exactly the way it was but it's under a different name, then Donald Trump is saying, well, we would still be negotiating basically with the EU, and we don't want to do that. Like you said, I think a lot of Americans, Rick, are just now educating themselves as to the trade realities that we haven't really known about in the past. Like, I never knew it was hard to negotiate with the EU until you just said it.
Yeah, they're on their best day, they're tough to deal with. But and look, there's a whole lot of political correctness and issues that are viewed through that lens that really kind of color our relationship with the EU, and it's been a problem for quite a while. But President Trump went over there and with the NATO conference, and he just basically said, he put his cards on the table. Here's how it's got to be, and we're not going to, we can't be responsible. James Mattis said this, it's almost as if we love your children more than you do, because we're doing the lion's share to protect you from Russia. Meanwhile, you're doing business with Russia. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, how does this make sense? And so Great Britain voted to leave the EU. Now, I'm an Anglophile. I lived in Great Britain as a kid. I love the British people. I was over there recently, and I can tell you that you've either got to do it or don't. This sort of half step that Theresa May is engaging in is sort of an effort to try and persuade people that, yes, she's responding to the vote of the British people, but at the same time retain that sort of what she views as that level of comfort with the European Union, but she's not really making a Brexit. She's making a more of a political accession, if nothing else. And quite frankly, I don't think the British people are going to stand for that. I mean, just from the tone that I've perceived while I was over there last month, I think that you've either got to go all in or all out. But this half-stepping is not palatable, and I think she's in trouble. She was a Remainer and now is responsible for implementing Brexit. She's trying to half-step it. And ultimately, you've got to get with the program or get out. And I think the British people are probably going to say it's time for you to go. But that said, back to the trade deal, Donald Trump's absolutely right. We want to have a trade deal with Great Britain, of all people. They're our greatest and longest ally. We certainly want to have a relationship with them. But we're not going to do it as an agent of the EU. I mean, that doesn't help us. And the EU is a separate deal, and we've tried that. We've continue to try that. We continue to try to engage and trade with the EU, and they're extremely difficult to deal with. And so it would be much better for everybody involved if the UK just did their own thing, reestablished themselves as a sovereign, reclaimed their border security, reclaimed their cultural heritage, and were proud of it, and they want to be. And this is what I love about the British people, and that's really what I love about the American people. And I think that's what you're seeing. And it's not just, by the way, it's not just in Great Britain that this is taking place. The whole globalist notion, which, EU is sort of a microcosm of that's really not taking root. I was met with some Australians recently, and it's an awful lot like the United States, the dynamic there with really kind of proclaiming their own independence and sovereignty and being proud of their heritage as Australians, as we are as being Americans, and as Filipinos are for, of being Filipino. And I mean, why should these nations be deprived of their history, their heritage, and their culture? And the answer is they shouldn't be. It doesn't mean that we can't do business together. It doesn't mean that we can't have, economic ties to these nations. It just means that we're different, and we have different history, we have different culture, and quite frankly, that's what I like about these other countries. That's why I like visiting other countries. If we just shake up the world into one homogenized, globalized system, what's the fun in that? Heck, I mean, why do I want to, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I enjoy going to Great Britain because it's Great Britain, right? I enjoy going and visiting other countries because they're different from ours. But I love America, and I still believe that we're the best country in the world, and there is such a thing as American exceptionalism that doesn't necessarily make us better, but certainly makes us markedly different from the rest of the world. And I think that's what the rest of the world really wants to see. And these folks in from these foreign countries that I named, they are craving U.S. leadership that's been absent for about 10 years, and Donald Trump is really about bringing back U.S. leadership. And so that's what's taking place around the world.
Yeah, it certainly is. I concur with your sentiments there. We're talking with Congressman Rick Crawford. Last question. So I know, the House has nothing really to do with the confirmation process of Supreme Court nominees, but what are your thoughts on Brett Kavanaugh? What's the feeling up there among your colleagues?
Well, the book on him is, he's an originalist, much like Clarence Thomas. And I think that what you could expect from him is, I don't care about, conservative as much as I care about constitutionalists. And so I think that's what you have in a pick like Kavanaugh. I read an interesting analysis earlier today or this morning. What the liberals up here are mostly afraid of is not Kavanaugh, but they're actually afraid of the Constitution. And so they talk about the Constitution, but what they really want to do is put people in place to help them alter the Constitution. And so there's a difference between, an originalist interpretation of the Constitution versus judicial activism. And so when they're denied their opportunity to engage in judicial activism, that scares them. And so what they're afraid of more than Neil Gorsuch or Brett Kavanaugh or Alito or Clarence Thomas, what they fear more is the fact that they are denied the opportunity to engage in really a perversion of the Constitution. So what they fear really is the Constitution itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know that if you have somebody that just actually adheres to the binding of the Constitution, meaning let's subscribe to the enumerated powers, the government can do this, what's specifically enumerated, and it can't do what's not specifically enumerated. And that, you're exactly right, Congressman Crawford. That's a great analysis. That does seem to be what they are worried about. Well, I listen, I really appreciate you coming on. It's always great to have you on, and I look forward to doing it again here in a couple of weeks.
Let me throw this out real quick to farmers that are listening. I tell you, it's not lost on me or anybody else the fact that U.S. farmers, Arkansas farmers in particular, are stepping up to do their part to reclaim American sovereignty in the global marketplace. So while we endure some short-term discomfort, the long-term payoff is going to be much more beneficial. So I just want to commend Arkansas farmers for their willingness to really take it for the team here, broadly speaking. And they know what I'm talking about, and you know what I'm talking about. It's uncomfortable right now, but in the long term, we're going to be much better off. And for those farmers that understand that, I appreciate that, and we're working hard to address this. But in the meantime, I appreciate what they're doing. I appreciate their willingness to take one for the team for a better America.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Sacrifice is very much appreciated in that regard. Congressman Rick Crawford, I appreciate it, sir.
You bet. Thank you.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, one of the things that I meant to cover that I didn't cover was this opinion by Dana D. Kelly on the Supreme Court and how partisan it's gotten. It's a guest article in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and it's really powerful about how, if you look at the history and how they, the confirmation process used to be very, very bipartisan. It's only recent. Before Bork, for example, when they dashed Robert Bork's nomination, it says here, the same Democrats who had voted yay for Scalia in 1986 just 1 year later bashed and dashed Bork's nomination in the most uncivil attack in recent memory at the time. Before Bork, though, here are the voting scores for the Supreme Court nominees starting in 1970. 94-0. Blackmun, 89-1. Powell, 68-26. Rehnquist, 98-0. Stevens, 99-0. O'Connor, 98-0. Scalia. It was Scalia under Reagan that just terrified the left. Just what Congressman Crawford was saying about they're scared of the Constitution, and Scalia was such an originalist that's when they started saying, "Hey, wait a second. We've got to change the Constitution, and we've got to legislate from the bench, and we need to make this confirmation process as partisan as we can." It's a recent development in the context of American history. Folks, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to be back in just a moment.
Miss Liberty and relit her torch. We reflected on all the millions who came here in search of the dream of freedom, inaugurated in Independence Hall. We reflected, too, on their courage in coming great distances and settling in a foreign land and then passing on to their children and their children's children. The hope symbolized in this statue here just behind us, the hope that is America. It is a hope that someday every people in every nation of the world will know the blessings of liberty. And it's the hope of millions all around the world. In the last few years, I've spoken at Westminster to the Mother of Parliaments, at Versailles, where French kings and world leaders have made war and peace. I've been to the Vatican in Rome, the Imperial Palace in Japan, and the ancient city of Beijing. I've seen the beaches of Normandy and stood again with those boys of Pointe du Hoc who long ago scaled the heights. And with, at that time, Lisa Zen.
What does the name Triple R have to do with bail bonds? Well, the Triple R stands for reliable, respectful, and relentless. When in need of bail bonds, you only need one number. Call 866-593-7457. Even if Triple R can't help, they'll take the time to provide you with the numbers of other bond companies in your area that can be of service. That's why they're the hub of Arkansas bail bonds. Triple R Bail Bonds has an app, they're paperless, and always reliable, respectful, and relentless.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
At a hen. who was at Omaha Beach for the father she loved. The father who had once dreamed of seeing again the place where he and so many brave others had landed on D-Day. But he had died before he could make that trip. And she made it for him. And Dad, she'd said, I'll always be proud. And I've seen the successors to these brave men. The young Americans in uniform all over the world. Young Americans like you here tonight, who man the mighty USS Kennedy and the Iowa and the other ships of the line. I can assure you, you out there who are listening, that these young people are like their fathers and their grandfathers, just as willing, just as brave, and we can be just as proud. But our prayer tonight is that the call for their courage will never come, and that it's important for us, too, to be brave. Not so much the bravery of the battlefield, I mean the bravery of brotherhood. All through our history, our presidents and leaders have spoken of national unity and warned us that the real obstacle to moving forward the boundaries of freedom, the only permanent danger to the hope that is America, comes from within. It's easy enough to dismiss this as a kind of familiar exhortation. Yet the truth is that even two of our greatest founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, once learned this lesson late in life. They'd worked so closely together in Philadelphia for independence. But once that was gained and a government was formed, something called partisan politics began to get in the way. After a bitter and divisive campaign, Jefferson defeated Adams for the presidency in 1800. And the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams slipped away to Boston, disappointed, brokenhearted, and bitter. For years, their estrangement lasted.
Thanks so much for being with us. We're going to leave this Cash music underlying us, and it's going to play us out here in just a minute. I just wanted to say thank you for listening. Thank you for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. You can go to conduitnews.com and get a copy of this broadcast and share it with your friends. You can get the podcast at the iTunes Store or the SoundCloud app. Or over at our YouTube channel, Conduit News, and subscribe to Conduit News YouTube channel, as well as click the little bell to receive notifications. Arkansas, I hope you again have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Be safe.